to the 10th episode in our AI and You podcast series. Today is Monday, September 14th, 2020, and I'm your host, Vicar Saidi. I'm a computer scientist and engineer, a lecturer, and a consultant. I'm also the author of several books. My most recent book is about artificial intelligence and is titled The Genome Affair. The Genome Affair is a work of speculative fiction. It examines what the world might be like if some of the more extraordinary capabilities forecast to be realized in AI over the next 20 to 30 years were actually realized today. Given the growing list of frightening existential threats humankind now faces, the book pays particular attention to the impact AI is expected to have on world affairs. The book is available in ebook format for those who prefer to read on a digital device, but it's also available in a high-quality paperback edition. The Genome Affair is available on Amazon, so I hope you'll take the time to read it and to leave a review. Book reviews are very helpful for writers. I'm available to give talks on artificial intelligence and its related technologies, and on the impact AI is expected to have on our world. If you'd like to get in touch with me to arrange a web-based event or consulting meeting with your company or organization, you can find my contact info in the podcast notes below. And now, on to today's podcast. In our last podcast, episode 9, I talked about excellence versus innovation in industry and society and its implications on the development of AI agents. I also talked about the notion of the genius as it relates to artificial intelligence. In today's podcast, episode 10, I'll talk about the implications for artificial intelligence as China and the West continue to decouple, and why this matters. Since early in 2020, the tenuous relationship between America and China has been cause for alarm, and the relationship has been degrading at a rapid pace. This is similarly the case in Australia, and to a lesser but now accelerating degree in mainland Europe and in the United Kingdom. In America, challenges to our bilateral Sino-American relationship are accumulating quickly. First, America's long simmering frustration regarding the fairness of Chinese trading policies and the issue of intellectual property rights for American companies doing business there can no longer be ignored. The staggering discrepancy in our dollar-denominated trading volume is also no longer tenable. Second, despite the verdict of international courts that has poured cold water on China's claims of territorial sovereignty over large portions of the South China Sea, China is persisting in bullying its association of Southeast Asian nations, its ASEAN neighbors, on these unfounded territorial claims through aggressive naval behavior and militarization throughout these contested and resource-rich waters. Third, China continues to violate the 50-year agreement they signed in 1997 regarding the future status of Hong Kong, the so-called One Country, Two Systems agreement. China's behavior since the beginning of 2020 in Hong Kong has alarmed neighboring states throughout the region, as well as in the United Nations. Fourth, China persists in their aggression towards and harassment of Taiwan by encroaching upon Taiwanese airspace in recent days with Chinese fighter jets. Fifth, China's mass incarceration of Uyghurs and other Turkic peoples in Xinjiang has been well documented, but even in the face of overwhelming evidence, China continues to deny that such incarcerations are taking place. Xinjiang makes up about 1/6 of China's landmass and is the source of nearly 90% of their cotton production. It is also a critical transit point in China's 21st century revival of the ancient Silk Road, known as the Belt and Road Initiative. Sixth, the theft of critical Western science and technical know-how by scientists and students from China has become untenable, as the FBI contends with over 2,000 open cases. Seventh, the quasi or dual-use configuration of seaports for commercial or military application in the aforementioned Belt and Road Initiative. These trading routes, or New Silk Road, connect China with the Middle East and the rest of the Asian continent, and onwards to Africa and Europe. Eighth, the extraordinary deception and mismanagement of an emerging infectious disease crisis during the early days of the coronavirus outbreak in Wuhan. Ninth, the recently reported repression of the peoples of Inner Mongolia. These 9 reasons, along with China's wolf warrior diplomatic approach when challenged to explain their behavior, has now provided sufficient basis for the near irreconcilable discord and subsequent bifurcation we are witnessing in Sino-Western relations. But what are the implications for artificial intelligence? After all, isn't AI just a technology? Why should it be impacted? Well, artificial intelligence has emerged as perhaps the most critical technology of the 21st century. AI and centralized data processing are enabling authoritarian states and dictatorships to operate more efficiently than their democratic rivals in administering their societies. This factor may be the single biggest change from the 20th century Cold War era with the Soviet Union, when the opposite scenario was true. During the Cold War, decentralized economies and states functioned far more efficiently. Today, synthetic silicon-based technologies, such as those found in modern computer systems where artificial intelligence agents reside, operate 1 million times faster than the organic, biochemical-based systems that enable thought and intelligence in Homo sapiens. This means that if we leave an AI agent, even a highly specialized, narrow AI agent, alone for just 1 week, it can process more thoughts in that single week than a normal human can process in 20,000 years. In August of 2020, researchers at University College London demonstrated an internet data transit rate exceeding 178 terabits per second. To put things in perspective, this data rate is fast enough to download the entirety of the US Netflix library in less than 1 second. When we combine general AI agents, or super AI agents, enabled by intrinsic reinforcement learning, that is, learning without human involvement, when we combine these agents with the capability of high-speed optical fiber communication, such as that from University College London, and then introduce the promise of parallel processing enabled by quantum computing, a picture begins to emerge of an intelligent being that is incomparable to any human that has ever lived, or is even possible through technologies such as neural implants. Now, getting back to our discussion on Sino-Western relations, it's important to point out that China is a world leader in artificial intelligence, second only to the United States. Today, 48% of global AI startup funding is occurring in China versus 38% in the United States. China has 641 AI-related patent publications in 2018 versus just 130 in the US. China had just 6 of the top AI startups in 2018 versus 76 in the US. But this year, in 2020, the Chinese state had planned to invest $70 billion in AI versus just $2.5 billion by the US government. As things become more contentious in the Sino-Western relationship, as seems increasingly likely, and more specifically, increasingly contentious in the Sino-American relationship, fewer foreign students from China will choose to come to the US for higher education in science and technology, and of those that do, few students will be granted admission. Chinese students at elite American universities are being searched as they leave the US for China and are having their devices searched or confiscated. Under an American counter-espionage and technology theft program called the China Initiative, dozens of Chinese researchers have been prosecuted for hiding military affiliations and for the theft of trade secrets. As previously mentioned, the FBI currently has over 2,000 active cases. There are currently 370,000 Chinese students in U.S. universities. They make up the largest single group, followed by India. But the anxiety surrounding the open hostility they feel at the hands of U.S. authorities is spreading amongst this diaspora. In 2019, 41,000 computer devices and phones were searched by the U.S. Customs and Border Patrol, and they are able to conduct these searches without a warrant. Over the past decade, the U.S. and the West have taken a generally open approach to artificial intelligence research by publishing much of their findings in the public domain, whereas China has been much less open. We can expect that, going forward, the West is likely to become far more restrictive and trusting. China will no longer have access to core Western technologies, including chipsets from Intel, Qualcomm, and others, and their own chip manufacturers will need time to acquire these skills and technologies on their own. The Chinese telecommunications giant Huawei will face restricted access to chips and software as well. But China presently retains access to U.S. patents, scientific papers, and particularly open source AI. At the same time, the Chinese state is making access to their IP and technology ever more restrictive. This environment is sure to lead to bifurcation, resulting in a Chinese science and technology sphere of influence around the globe, alongside an American-led one across the Western liberal democracies. For quite some time, the U.S. has neglected to invest in the development of a coherent national industrial policy that goes beyond blue sky thinking, whereas China maintains a very long-term view. Together, the U.S. government and industry have been profoundly guilty of very short-term thinking that maintains an acute focus on short-term goals and profit maximization without regard for virtually any other parameter, including industrial and supply chain security. America has been outsourcing for decades, so restructuring supply chains and manufacturing strategies will take time. Neoliberalism espoused the view that capital, goods, and labor should move around without restrictions because it results in the most efficient model. But proponents of this policy did not realize that it works very poorly during a crisis such as the one we are now experiencing. Thus, America has had no contingency planning whatsoever. It's important to note that China is also moving towards science and technology decoupling from the US and the West as it further expands its Belt and Road network across Asia and Europe. But it is likely to face similar pushback from Western European nations that are fresh from the recent bruising they took from Chinese diplomats and their wolf warrior diplomacy. Thank you for spending some time with me. I'm trying to follow the TED Talk format, and so I'm keeping these podcasts to about 20 minutes. Let me know what you think. I hope you'll find these insights into artificial intelligence helpful, and I hope you'll read my new book, The Genome Affair. It's on Amazon. Until next time then, this has been the AI and You podcast with author Vicar Saidi.